kind of make to order, we have this concept of you can generally start with a quote if you want. You can use LM and some of its ability to look up costs and everything in order to create a quote. And you can then turn a quote into a sales order. That's a standard Acumatica feature. But if you have a quote with a worksheet, what I'm calling a worksheet, because you actually can't release one of these items. And I'll show you that here in a sec. So if we go in and we create a quote for a customer, and okay, and we go in here and we an item that we know is an item that we manufacture. Okay, we'll note that if the item is an item that we can manufacture, the LM add-in will enable this field. So if you wish, you can create a dedicated work order. If you have some items that are mandatory that you must create a work order for them, then there's a setting on the inventory ID where you can say that it will force a work order. So if I go through here and I say, is a kit, if I go through and I select the item here, bespoke item, and I'll save that. And then I go back and I'll just delete this item. I just want to show you how this feature works. Okay. And now I'm going to add that item again. When I added that, let me just make sure it's going to do that. When I added that, it's supposed to, and we will make it do that. It's supposed to make sure that this is checked, that this dedicated work order value is checked. So when you set that bespoke item on the item master, you're basically saying every time I put this on a sales order, I want to enforce that a work order will be generated for it. So then anyway, we can go through and we can add an item here. From here, it works pretty much the same. And I'll save this. And now what'll happen, if I look at my menus, I've got a new menu that's injected by LM, and it's generate work orders. But you'll notice that I actually can't do any of the other functions, which are ship the work order or anything like that, because I'm now saying that I'm going to build a specific item for this customer on a work order. The work order has to be finished and completed before this sales order line can be shipped. So that's making sure that you're getting the bespoke item that you're manufacturing for this customer on this sales order shipping to this customer. So I'll go through and I'll generate the work order. But at this time, remember, we're only working on a quote. So if we go to the work order number, the work order actually is really a quote. You'll notice that the status is quote, and it's telling us that it's a quote here and everything like that. Now I can go in here and I can add the features that I want. If there's something unique about this feature, 2 hard drives, for instance, that made this unique, I can save that. Okay. One of the other nice features when you're demoing this product that you can show, that's a nice feature, is if I add a new item, and this is kind of a job shop feature too. We'll go over a bunch of things at the same time. Okay, and I save this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run out. I'm going to show. I like to do this for job shop manufacturers. I like to browse and add some other files. So I'll go through here and I'll go in here and I'll add, say for instance, I want to add a drawing. Okay, I can actually add a drawing, and I can go through. Did it upload? Okay, and I can go through and I can add another thing, and then sometimes I add a spec here or something like that. We had one customer that built robots, or a prospect that built robots, so I just added this. And this might be kind of an engineer to order feature where, let's say somebody is a technical salesperson who's putting together a quote for a prospect, and they're basically kind of defining some machines they're going to incorporate in their design and everything. So that's kind of what I'm mimicking here. But the nice thing about this is when we do this now, and of course now it's going to, we have to give it a quantity. Let's give it a quantity on this one. Now when we have a quantity, what's it not doing? It's not doing this. Well, I don't know what's wrong now. Go back to this one here. Well, I guess I have to select the dedicated work order before it'll actually generate the work order. That was operator error, that one. Now I've generated another work order. When I go to that work order, what's nice is it pushes all those files through. So the idea is that it's like product data management, a poor man's product data management. It'll actually, you can actually sort of use the quote, and then all this information you gather during the quote process is not lost when it moves to the next phase of actually getting the order and everything. So in this case, if you're happy with the quote and everything is good on the quote, what you can do is you can actually, not to confuse the issue, I'm just going to delete this line. And just a word about this, when you have a work order generated and you delete a line and the work order is not released, I think even if it is released, you will actually delete the work order. As long as the work order is not completed, you will delete the work order. So you're basically saying, I want to quit that. So if I do this and I save it, and just to show you that work, that was 1197. If I go to work orders, you'll notice there is no 1197 here, okay, because we deleted it. So anyway, at this point, what I want to do is I want to generally change this quote into a sales order. So I think I do that by copying the order, and I want to create it to a new order type like this. And so I'll go through that function. And now I'll save this. And now you'll notice that this work order number actually followed this. And if I go out here, this one should be in planning phase now. So what it did is the whole worksheet that I was working on, actually, my quote worksheet actually became my work order. And so that's a nice way so you don't have to duplicate all that work you did when you were generating a quote. It'll follow you right along as well. And as well, your drawings and everything are still associated with this. So it's now changed the type instead of from a quote to a sales order. So that's kind of an interesting feature there. There's some other features on a sales order. If we go in and we do another sales order. Oh, well, hang on. Let me go through my list here. Okay. Bespoke and repair item. Okay. Bespoke and repair item. What you can do is sometimes you'll sell an item and it goes out and you actually service the item. So you actually comes back into your organization and you have to do a repair on it. So what we can do in that case is, in order to accommodate that transaction, LM has some functions that can help. So what we'll go in and we'll actually pick a customer. And we'll go in, and now what we'll do is we can create some kits and to repair an item. And let me give you an example of where that might be. Say, for instance, you're in the business of selling hydraulic cylinders. Everybody knows a hydraulic cylinder. It's a simple machine. It's got a rod, and it's got a barrel, and it's got a piston in there, and then there's seals in there that seal the rod to the flange nut in the end of the barrel, and seal the piston to the inside of the barrel, so that when it fills with hydraulic fluid, it extends. Simple enough procedure. But if you sell these, you manufacture them, and they go out, and they could have a serial number on them. And when they come back, they might come back, and you might repair them by replacing them with a seal kit. So what you could do is you could set up, so we've got a laptop repair item here. So what we're doing is we're going to go in and we're going to repair this item, okay? And that's been marked as a dedicated thing, okay? So that means that it's going to create a work order. And that means that this is, and we've actually identified that this repair, kind of a spec, is actually to repair this item. So what we're really doing is we're saying we're going to repair this item. So I'm going to, how many of these am I going to repair? I'm going to repair one. Okay, I'll save that now. And now I will generate a work order, and we'll go and have a look at what that work order looks like. Now, when we look at the work order over here, we'll see that the work order is has identified the item that we're going to put in, and it's basically marked it for repair. This is important because, well, I won't get into that, but it's marked it for repair. You'll see that in the next phase when we get to that. So if I go through the motions with a work order, I'll go through and I will complete planning. And I probably got some labor on here to repair this. Do I? Yes, here's labor to repair it, okay? And so I'm saying I'm going to get this, and then I will release it. When I release it now and I go to the kit, okay, you'll notice that it's going to say that it expects one of these items to come in. Now, we're going to expect, potentially, we're going to expect the customer to return that on an RMA. They potentially could return it on an RMA. And so at that point in time, you're going to have an inventory receipt transaction. And then you're going to get the serial number for the item, and you can put the item, when you go through and you basically, after you receipt the item, the repair item, you can go through the line details and pick the serial number that came in for that item, if it's serialized. If it's not, you can just pick it. And you can go through and you can repair it, and you can add all of the other components that you might have had to add to fix it. So, for instance, on the work order, if we had to add some other items here, I'm not sure if I've got it. I'll pick an item here. I'll pick say I needed this part in order to fix it, and I needed 2 of these. I can go through and I can add all of the items that, oh, sorry, I'm on the work order. I didn't mean to do that. That's confusing everybody. Let's go back to the production order. If I go back to the production order. So I can now add all of the items that I want here. So I could go. Bad item. I can pick an item here and how many I needed 1. So, and it'll generally build up the cost. Now notice that the cost on the item for the repair item is 0. The reason is the company that's repairing the item is not bearing any cost. The item has been bought and paid for from the customer. It's coming back for repair. And these are all the things we add to the work order are actually the supplemental charges that we'll be charging for the repair order. So that's why the cost is 0 here, and the cost will be booked at 0 when the work order is complete. So there will be no financial transaction for this line item in the general ledger, because we don't own it. We're just fixing it. It's going in, it's going out. But if the building burns down, we've got a record of it in the building when the building burned down. So that's it. And so it's just the normal process. You would go through and you would finish everything. And what you can do is, if you want, when you've got a cost to repair, so I've got my material costs here, and I can say in my material and my labor costs, I actually could, if I want, mark those up certain percentage, okay? And then at that point in time, if I wanted, I could price the sales order. Oh, you paying attention, David? There's one you'll get. It'll actually go back and price the sales order, the line on the sales order, this price of $328 that we had. So supposed to do that, but we're going to run into a few bugs, because I don't demo this very much or test it very much, if I'm being totally honest. So that was there any questions on repair orders at all by anybody?
No, just if we're going through this list is features that we're looking to add. So if we have a look at the repair orders, they're already there. So this should actually come off this list, correct?
No, that's incorrect. This is a list of everything that is in the product, but that, from our understanding, your team needed some more training on.
Okie dokes. I thought these were also additional things, but this is great, because we do need training on this. So,
yeah, and as you can see, they probably need a little. They require some testing, and there's an occasional bug that needs to be addressed.
That's 100%. No, I'm quite happy with that. David, you happy?
Good.
Yep.
I have one question, Greg.
Yeah.
I have one question, Greg, going back to the bespoke orders, the first item.
Yes.
Can one execute a partial against a bespoke order? Because you mentioned that you had to complete, before you could close the sales order, you had to ship the product, or to ship the line, I think it was.
I don't know. We'd have to test it. I don't know how it would behave. I've never tested that.
So for the team, one of the features that the Flex line includes is this notion of partials. And often we would generate a work order. So now the demand is from the work order itself, and for 10. And then the customer says, hey, I need 5 right away. And maybe you don't have the labor or the material or the whatever to finish all 10, so you ship just 5. That's a big time requirement from the software perspective. Literally 100 plus hours went into developing that partials capability. So now we support that, but now I'm asking Greg, does that feature work when the source of the demand comes from the sales order versus the work order? Make sense?
Well, the answer, I'll give you part of the answer. The answer is yes, you can do a partial on that. There's nothing that inhibits it, but actually I didn't write the code that tests the status of the work order when you're trying to ship on a sales order line, okay? So remember I said that when you want to ship an item on a sales order line, the work order has to be complete. I actually didn't write that code, so I don't know what it does when an order is partially complete. So that would be something we would have. I can
test that.
Yeah, we'll have to test it, and if so, we'll have to get back to the developer that actually wrote that feature. And
all right, and then Jake, there's two adaptations of this from a demo perspective. Adaptation number one is in the make to stock world. So I want to make 100 units a month because my plan tells me. I run my demand plan and it says, oh, I can sell 100 of these guys a month. So I generate a work order for the year for 1,200. 12 times 1,200 is 100. So I'm going to get 100 a month. So I ship partially 100, or I execute and make 100 a month against this work order for 1,200. And I tie my purchasing to that also. So now I'm making sure I don't put out a cash outlay for the 1,200 units up front. I have a blanket order with my vendor to deliver 100 of the raw material to make that 100 against the one work order. That's adaptation number one for partials. Another adaptation is in the job shop ETO world. Here, I'm generating a pilot item. I have an idea what I want to make, but I'm adding and subtracting from the BOM as I go along. And on the labor side, I'm bringing in my engineer to tweak the guy, to tweak the end item that I'm selling. And I don't know how many engineering orders it's going to be. So my deal with the customer is, yeah, I'll build this pilot device for you, but I'm going to bill you on a monthly basis for all engineering services associated with its development. So I open the work order. Let's say it takes 6 months to develop the pilot. I'm generating 6 service bills, 1 per month, for engineering services associated with the eventual delivery of the pilot. So in the engineer to order business, that's a big deal because originally a lot of manufacturing systems, you have to complete the work order before, from an accounting standpoint, you can bill for it, right? You have to complete the finished good and logically put it into stock before you can ship it, before you can invoice it. That's how the logic works in the underlying debits and credits. And Greg has come up with a way to support partials so that you can partially deliver a work order on the material or on the labor side and bill for that partial completion, right? The other footnote to all this is that in the make to stock and make to order world, you can do all this partial stuff with serialized items, which is a big deal because that means that when you have let's say you had a work order for the 12 items or 10 items, doesn't matter, and I ship 5. Well, now my allocation tables, I have to consume the 5 I shipped, where the 5 I haven't shipped yet are still in WIP, work in process. So there's a lot of logic that goes on here to support this notion of partials, which is why it's, I don't know, somewhere between 100 and, 500 hours of development. It's more than the 50 that we first thought. How's that?
Yeah.
Is that a good way? Anything I missed on that little commentary, Greg?
No, it was good.
Good. All right. So big time importance.
So I'm gonna diverge here and just go off the list because there is some other things I'd like to talk about when we're talking about bespoke orders. One of the things that you might want to do is if you encounter a prospect that is a job shop. So what it is they basically are reactive. The phone rings and the guy says, I need you to build something. And job shop and engineer to order kind of in my mind fall in the same category, except engineer to order is like super job shop. It's not just, build me one part. It's like build me this whole thing, right? And so, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some features that can that can support that. If I go in here and let's say I have no idea what the customer wants. They're saying, I'm going to send the part and a drawing over. Okay, and so you're going to basically start from a blank sheet of paper. You can just kind of go custom here. So I can just do a custom fabrication here. I'll just do this. And then I'll enter a quantity. And I'll do 1. Okay. And I'll save this. Okay, and the customer now will give me a drawing. So I'll go through and I'll get a drawing here. And let's say the customer is sending me a drawing. So I will browse. And I'm going to look for a, what is a good one here? What is this one? Okay, customer wants me to make this part. I'm in this thing. We'll imagine I'm a machine shop. So this is the part that the customer wants me to make. I'll add it here. And the customer wants me to make 50 of these. So I'm not going to put in a quantity of 50. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say it's one job. So I'm going to create a job. But what I'm going to do is if I go out here and it's not on the main line here, it's on, it's on the details. If I go to the details, I can put in here what the customer's SKU number is. And let's say that was on 9506. And the customer's quantity was he wanted 50. And the customer's unit of measure is eaches. And we can put that on there. So I'm going to save that now. The reason is this becomes important because when the customer gets a packing slip from us, the customer doesn't want to go, oh, job number, it would appear on our bill, it would appear job number 1200. Well, that means nothing to the customer. What the customer wants to see on his packing list is he wants to see 50 of a 9506 because that's what he's ordering. Now, because of some of the limitations, and I don't want to go in and I don't want to create an individual kit spec, and I don't want to go through and create an individual stock item for this customer's one-time job, what I'm doing is I'm going to run it under this sort of a blanket item work order, which is going to be this custom fabrication. So now that I've done that, I'll go through and I'll generate my, what'll I do here? I've generated my work order. I'll go through to my work order. And now I'm on my work order. And I can see that for that particular item on custom fab, I did have one item on there. On this custom fab spec, I had one item on there. And did I have some labor? No, I didn't have any labor. So you could pre-populate things. Say, for instance, you're in the business of making some kind of a roller. And you know that the roller is always going to be made out of a certain type of pipe. And what might vary is the length of the pipe that I'm going to use in the roller. I could sell 24, 36, 48-inch rollers if I want. So what I can do is I can sort of pre-populate my custom fab, or I could leave it just blank. If I make it absolutely blank, I can do this. Now, there's another nice feature for this type of thing. If you're a machine shop, and you generally have all these steps that you're going to be doing in your manufacturing process. So you're going to have somebody go in and draw the thing up in SolidWorks. You're going to have somebody go in and create G-code for it in Mastercam. You're going to have a machinist loaded in a specific machine. You're going to have materials that you're going to use. You've got routine things you do, but they're unique to the individual item that you're building. Well, in this case, what I can do is I can actually import a template if I want. So what happens is the template is all of these items that I might use that are in a kit spec out there. So I can import certain kit specs that are marked as templates. So I've got a kit spec out there that's marked as a template. So this might be a template for all of the operations that I need to do to build a pressure vessel. Okay, so if I import that, it will import all of these operations that I potentially could use. Okay, now that saved me a lot of work to look up 10 different part numbers in Acumatica. It's easier than it could be, but it's still a bit of a pain, but it's brought everything in for me. And now I can just cherry pick what I want to do. Okay, this one I want to add 4 hours of welding, right? I want to do this, and I want to add an hour of a machinist time. I can do that. And then I can delete the ones I don't want if I want. I can just do that. So it's a lot easier to subtract items I don't want than it is to run out and find items that I want. And so I can save that. And you've got templates both on the labor and on the material side. So I can import a template on the material side if I choose. I can go out, and this might be a bunch of parts that I use here. Okay, so that's all good. What do I want to do here? So that's all good. Now, I might even have an occasion where a customer is asking me something on a specific, this is more an engineer to order thing. I build pumps. And one of the variables might be the size of the pump and the size of the electric motor. I might have a standard skid that they all mount on, but I may be able to use different pumps, and I may be able to use different power sources, maybe an electric motor, maybe a gasoline engine, maybe it's only got a shiv that gets driven, or maybe it's got a hydraulic motor on it, that they have some wet pack that they drive the hydraulic motor with. Well, in that case, what I can do is, but I don't know all the details that I have. I can add what we call a placeholder. So if I go in here and I add pH, I think that's it. Here's a placeholder for an item. Okay, it's identified as a placeholder. And now, for costing purposes, I can put a cost in if I want. Okay. All right. And now what I have is I have a placeholder. Now, when an item has a placeholder on it, there's a restriction. I will not be able to release this work order with a placeholder on it. The reason is that purchasing people and manufacturing people can't have one of these just faked out items. Also with placeholders, I can put in here, I can actually edit the text in this, give, the purchasing agent down the road the idea. So now the purchasing agent may at some point in time be asked to, okay, yeah, the customers agreed with that. Let's go ahead and get that part that we need. So it's been spec'd. Somebody's attached the spec. An engineer has attached the spec for the pump that he wants and everything. So what will happen is now the purchasing agent will go out, will look at this, have the information they need, contact the vendor, if necessary, set the vendor up, add a stock item for this particular item, because now at this point it's going to go through your warehouse and it's basically going to be a financial transaction. You're probably going to purchase it, inventory it, consume it, and incorporate it in your product. But that's another engineer to order feature. So really templates and placeholders are kind of engineer to order features accompanied with that stuff that we had as well. You'll notice on here we also have, this is our planned quantity. As I mentioned, the job number, that customer quantity is coming through here. And that customer quantity is actually used, will be used on our unit price. And things like that when we're calculating a unit price, because the customer may have asked us for a price on 50 units. And if we tell him back that it's going to be X amount for the job, he'll obviously ask you the question, well, how much is that per unit? Because what he's doing is he's getting other vendors to quote him on a per unit basis. And so you'll have the ability to give him that answer as well. So those are some job shop and engineer to order features.
Now, another little commentary, Greg.
Yeah.
Could you go to the labor template, please?
Yeah, I'm here. Oh, to the template? Okay.
To the template for the labor.
Oh, you want me to go to? You want me to go?
Well, just here's the point. a lot of times in the job shop and especially the job shop market, where the company is in an industry, as an example, building racks for countertops. In this case, no one order to the next, to the next, to the next are different bills of material from the material perspective. They never build the same thing alike. You might have a rack for a smartphone and you might have a rack for a water bottle. The racks are going to be different. However, the process to build the rack is often similar because they're always building the same thing. Job shops typically tend to focus in an industry making the same type of thing. A booth for a display is another example, or a platform for advertisements, is another example. So my thinking is, from a demo standpoint, we might show where we start off with a blank bill of material on the material side using placeholders, but then we say, now we'll pop up and we'll bring up the template of the processes required to make something. And here we just put in different hours because they might go from design to initial construction, and then they got to process the metal, and then they got to paint the thing, and then they got to ship it. And all those services have a cadence to them, or a similarity to them, comparing one job to the next. Do you agree with that thinking, Greg?
Yes.
So, Jake, That would be a good way of demonstrating job shop, that we have the dynamic BOM on the material to build from scratch all the time, placeholders, A. B, build from scratch all the time, or have a template BOM, which is more make to order / job shop. C, on the labor side, go from scratch or use a template, because the cadence of what you're doing has a similarity to it. On the engineer to order side, it's like my example of the pilot system. There, truly, you're probably using a BOM that's dynamic, and you're filling in stuff on both the labor and the material side from scratch. All right. Thank you, Greg.
All right. And one other thing here that we should note is you can have both, because we're using the kit and its limitations. If you know Acumatica manufacturing, you'll know that they have machines and routings and tooling and a lot more constraints. And that's good if you need those constraints. That's generally for high run rate type manufacturing environments where you're building a lot of things, you want to optimize it a lot. But when you're not in that case, when you're like where we are and you're going to want to organize not only your people, but your resources, one thing you can put on here, you can see here that I have labor. Now, there's labor to sandblasting. That is the guy with the helmet holding the sandblaster that's pointing it at the workpiece. And then there's actually a cost, and I've got it in here at $275 an hour for the shop process of sandblasting. And what's going to happen is that's going to mean that there's a compressor that's dedicated, there's a sandblast unit that's dedicated, and there's the sand that's dedicated. That sand's not cheap, and the fuel for the compressor is not cheap. So that comes in at a cost of $275 an hour. You want to make sure when you're quoting that you get all of these costs, and you want to make sure when you're scheduling, which is coming up in future versions, that you're getting all of the resources that you have to basically balance. So ideally, I wouldn't want to have 7 units that would require sandblasters concurrently when I only have one available. So in the future scheduling component, you will be able not only to schedule the labor, the person doing the work, but you will be able to schedule the equipment. So in this way, for instance, if you had a dedicated 5-axis machine that must be used to manufacture this particular thing, and it carries a unique over your shop rate cost or something, you could add it here if you want. So this gives you, again, with the flexible BOM, gives you a lot of opportunity to handle all of these things. But I just wanted to point that out when we were there. So next on, what have I got next on my list? Oh, hang on. It's locked up here. Just opening up my list again. So any questions from anybody?
No, that's great. The next on your list, it was partials, non-serialized items. That's straightforward enough. Not a problem with that.
Yeah, let
Then
me just show you partials for a second, okay?
Okay.
It's kind of important, especially when you're demoing it. I could see some questions arising. If we go to production orders and we go to one that's released that has a quantity on it, all right, well, let's just go to this one and let's just release it. So we will go to, where am I? It's in planning. Okay, take it off of hold. Get off of hold, and I will complete the planning, and I will release it. Oh, financial period is closed. Let's just change the date that we wanted here. February 2023. I think this date is open. Let's save that, and now we should be able to release it. No, doesn't like that financial period. Let me start in. Let me go to a different one here. Bad one. Or I could just open up the financial periods. Let me do that. Sorry, guys, little maintenance here. I'll come across this error all the time. And it always looks more tragic than it is. Action, open, 2023. Let's just select all these financial periods to open. Anytime people see that little box pop up, they think it's a disaster, and it's not necessarily a disaster. It's just, okay, so let's go back into the item that we had picked. What have we got here? That's a quote planning. I've got 24 here. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to release this. Okay. The reason that was in a future period was it was from the production planning system. It was generated from the production planning system. So now I've got 24 here. Now what I can do is I can actually create a partial completion. So there's going to be some constraints here. I can partially complete. Here's how it works. I can partially complete different amounts up to and including 23 units. Okay, now the last unit, you'll notice that there's 24 on this work order, because you can only partially complete less than the quantity that's planned. The reason being is the final work order, which is this one that we're looking at right now, kind of is the catch-all for all the deltas on the product. So, for instance, when you partially complete it, okay, the assumption is being made that when you partially complete it, the assumption is being made that, okay, you'll notice that it created a kit. As soon as I saved it, it created a kit. And now I can complete the partial. Now, the assumption being made there is that those two work orders that were completed went through at whatever I've designated here as being my standards. So it's like quick completing it. It's like back flushing it at our norms. So 1 per unit would be consumed, and our labor would be consumed at the rate that it is here. We don't have any here. So now when I partially complete it, Okay, I will have 22 outstanding to finish on this work order, but I partially completed 2. So if I go through and I partially complete this, probably don't have enough inventory and I'll get an error, I guess. Will I or won't I? What's it doing? There, it's released it. So now I have 2 items. I have 2 of these items in inventory. And a partial completion is great because I always like to use the thing. If you've been in production any length of time, the sales manager will always come down from the lofty offices and ask you how fast, that big order that you're doing, Greg, how fast can you get 5 done for me? I got a customer that's in a rush. Okay, that statement and that question invariably is asked if you're in production, and this answers it. You could pull 5 aside, complete them, and go ahead, and now they're in inventory. Now that they're in inventory, you can actually put them on a sales order and cut an invoice and ship them to the customer. So that's the partial completions feature. And if I was going to complete another partial completion, if the guy wanted me to do 2 the next day, I can do 2 more the next day, right? And then when I save that, it'll generate a kit for that. And of course, then I would go through and I would complete the partial. So you see how this works. And this will work up until the sum of the quantity completed is 23 or less. It'll allow me to keep adding partial completions until they do that. And I'll be restricted to keeping the sum of this below 23. And the reason is we want to collect the scrap, anything that might have been scrapped, any overages, any delta in the hours and everything like that. We ultimately want that to capture that delta from the norms, and we're going to use the last work order, this work order here, that we're on to do that. Now, if I complete this work order, I'm going to end up completing it for, I'll have to complete this partial or delete it. Now I can delete a partial, and it will again delete that work order, or that kit assembly is gone now. But I will now complete this work order for 22. So any questions? I kind of bumbled through that, but any questions on how that works?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So on partial completion, when you do the release, it automatically create and release kit assembly. Am I right?
Yes. If you look at it.
And what happens if you try to delete this line?
Well, this line, I don't think you're able to delete this line right now. If we try to delete it, what happens if we delete it? Okay, let me save that. You're not supposed to be able to delete it. If it's released, you're not supposed to be able to delete it. So let's go out to our inventory and see if it actually did delete that. Let's look out at the kit assemblies. That will be a bug. You're not supposed to be able to delete one. Well, it actually didn't delete the production order, but it did delete it off the work order. So we'll have to stop deleting it off the work order. Because there's the 2 that we finished. They actually are in inventory. You didn't delete them, but let me just make a note of that. I'll write that up.
Thank you.
So there's how it's supposed to work and how it works. Sometimes they diverge. Okay. So that was that. Now, other items that I had here. Let me just okay. Just open this up. Okay. So we've got unit costing booked amount. Okay, I'll spend just a bit of time because there's been an update in this. There was a bunch of issues in costing that where it wasn't adding up right, and there was multiples and stuff like that. In this last release, I've gone through and I believe we fixed most of these problems. So if we go through here and we add an item, so if we say change this item that's $1,325. If we look, our costs are roughly $1,541 a unit. If I go through here and I change this now to 2, okay. Oh, I let it sit too long. It's logged me out. Okay, let's go back in. But I'm on 2 different instances. This is 22R2. A lot of the other stuff I was showing you was on 22R1. So if I go to why is it? Oh, hang on. I've got to log out. I logged in with a user without permissions on a lot of things, which is why my menu was restricted. You'll notice I have all my menus back now because I'm logged in as a user with this. If I go to what was I going to show? I've just drawn a mental blank here. What was I going to show?
Costing.
Costing. There we go. Costing. Okay. Wow. Dementia who? Okay. If I go in and I put the quantity required per unit of measure, again, costing was $1,541. If I go in and I put in 2, okay, you'll notice that my costing reflects that immediately. Okay. Same thing with labor. If I go through and I add, my unit of measure, this, for instance, is in minutes. So if I add 90 minutes, okay, that's an hour and a half, but my cost is at 74 cents a minute. If I look at the job costing, you'll notice that my labor is in the units that I want it specified in because I'm planning in hours, okay, in man hours. And so it's made that conversion to convert that for me, and it's actually basically figured up my price too, which is 74 cents times 90 minutes is $66.60. So I believe most of these problems that we had in this not being correct, with your labor not adding up correctly, and with these numbers not adding up correctly, those costing issues have all been resolved. Just a word about costs, okay? We vary a little from other applications in Acumatica that look up cost. If you look in the code, we look up the cost. We generally go out and try and look up the cost in the same way that the kit assembly looks up cost when it's doing its financial transactions. If we can't find that cost, then we will go out and we will look up the preferred vendor's cost. If we can't find the preferred vendor's cost, then we will run out and look up the best cost or the most appropriate cost from the list of vendors we have that have a cost. So you may have multiple vendors that can ship the product for you. We'll look up that cost. If we don't have a cost at that point, we may go up and look up vendors that have given us a cost for that in their price lists. There is a function in Acumatica where you can actually import costs from a vendor, and you may have a cost from that vendor for that particular item. And we'll actually keep searching until we find a cost. This is important for quoting in that you don't want to waste a whole lot of time looking up, trying to find cost in your system. And so, excuse me for a sec. And so we'll go through and do that. Now you can look up the developers can look up that costing routine and see how it works. It's in a dedicated method in the graph, and it'll show you all the ways that we go and look it up. But generally, we will start by looking at very much what Acumatica does, and we will be looking at it'll come up in a sec. Just loading the thing for the first time. It'll look at the cost on the item master. It takes that as being the primary cost because you're saying that's the cost that you generally want to carry, which is this cost. But when it doesn't have that, it will search other places in the system for the cost. Okay, just a couple things on costing I wanted to chat about. So it'll look up costs here, and if it doesn't find a cost here on this page, it will look up a cost here from the vendors, okay, from the default vendor, okay. If it doesn't find a cost from the default vendor, it will look up in, I think it's called vendor pricing. Vendor prices, it'll look up in vendor prices. So you can look up under your vendor here, and yeah, you can look it up in here, and you could have your inventory ID here in vendor prices. So it will look up here. There's another setting that we may want to look at here that can affect costing, and it's basically, where is it here? Okay, non-default vendor preference. So when you're looking up vendors and you're saying, okay, I couldn't find a standard cost, I didn't have a default vendor that had a cost available for me, so I'm going to run around and search for other vendors in the system that can supply it. Now, if I come up with more than one of them, how do you want me to select that vendor? And it could be make no selection. So if we don't have a preferred vendor, or we don't have a last cost, then we will have no cost. Or do you want me to select that vendor based on cost, which would be they are the lowest cost vendor, or would you like me to select that vendor based on their ability to deliver the parts to me the quickest? So the days it takes them to get to us is lower than the other vendors. So cost is irrelevant in this case. Delivery becomes the most important thing. So there's just a feature there that's kind of tied into the whole costing and everything. What else have we got that we could go over here that might make sense?
Greg, the handmaiden on the costing is the allocation tables and inventory and items, all that's, any words you need to talk about that? I know you put a lot of work into, especially with serialized items, making sure that the allocation tables work, inventory,
right.
all that stuff.
So if we look at allocations, an important thing, especially from the developer's perspective, is to understand that we have, if we look at our quantity by plan type, okay, we have production demand here of 2, and we have kit assembly demand. Okay, what we potentially could have is a situation where people are using Acumatica's standard kitting functionality concurrently with Flex Manufacturing, which hijacks kit assemblies for its purposes of doing the inventory and financial transactions. So what happens is you could actually, in the case of where we just were looking at which one was it? Looking at this kit assembly, you could realize that we actually have a kit out here that could have a computer, Elite 1 computer allocated to it, and yet I still, because I want visibility of this requirement, I could have an allocation for this one. Now, FlexMFG is smart enough to know that that's not right, that you can either, if it's allocated on the kit, then the item plan for this one is set to 0 so that you're not showing a duplicate of demand. You're only showing the demand for the one item that you want to build. But now when you use serialized items in Acumatica, if you have a serialized item on a kit, it's actually not allocated until you actually select the serial number. So again, LM is smart enough to know that. And if there is no serial number allocated on this one, then it puts its demand in there for that. So it allocates it that way. So I wouldn't dig into that. That's a real hornet's nest if you had to. Just take it as I believe that it's fairly right, and we've got it. There's another feature that's been added in 171 that people may not know about, and it's the ability to hard allocate an item. Now, hard allocating an item is if you've got something in inventory and you want to dedicate it for a particular work order. Well, what could you physically do? If you're the production manager, as I was for a period in my life, I would run out and grab that part from the warehouse and put it under my desk so that nobody stole it from me for another job. Let's just say in that environment, sometimes we didn't have the best inventory controls. But what you may want to do is you may actually want to physically or virtually move it to another location. So in this case, if I look down here, I have one on hand for this particular item. And I may want to allocate it. I might want to say, okay, I know that I'm going to have to ship one unit right away as a test unit to the customer, for some mock-up or design or something that they have to do. So I have to make sure I get that one unit to them as fast as possible. And I see that I've got a critical component out there that I want to allocate. Well, in that case, what you can do is you can actually pick a location to allocate it to. So I'm going to say that what I want to allocate this one to is, have I got something in here that matches that? What have I got in here? Not in this environment, but I could say, I want to allocate it. I've created a location in an inventory, which is this item, okay? And what I want to do is I want to allocate it right here. So what it would do is it would transfer the quantity that I need. It would actually do an inventory transfer document to physically move the document so that this particular warehouse that I have 2 in would be decremented by, or this location in the warehouse of 2 would be decremented by the quantity I'm moving it to this location. And one of the interesting things about it is you can set up this location that people can't sell out of it and people can't transfer items out of it. So you actually could restrict this location so that other people in the system don't, by mistake, consume your parts if you're not hiding it under your desk. Okay. But in this case, so that's how you can allocate it. And when you basically hard allocate the item, so what do I do here? I kind of forget how I did this. So you put in here the quantity that you want to allocate. I'm not sure what's going on here, why it's not allocated. Maybe I have to allocate it before it's released. I think that's the problem. And I can put in the quantity that I'm going to allocate, and then I basically hit the hard allocate button, and it will actually create the transfer order to move it from this point to that point. Someone can test that it works on a planned order, that you actually can do that. But that's how it's supposed to work. And Vlad did this for us. So last time I tested it, it worked. I've made a few changes to it as well. So anyway, that's hard allocating. So hard allocating in our system is actually moving it from your generally available location into a specific restricted location. That's how we're hard allocating.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I wonder how the system handle when let's say our component items serialized or load item in this case.
All right. When it's a serialized item, what it'll do is it will create the transfer. Okay. And now the transfer, you have to go on the transfer if it's a serialized item, and very much like you have to do on the kit assembly, you have to select the serial number and then complete the transfer. And then at that point, it's actually there. And I don't quite remember. I thought we had a field for that. No, I guess not. So, but it does it internally. I'll have to test that out and write that up, exactly how that works. It's been a couple of months since I was in that looking at that. But that's hard allocations. Back to our list. What else could we go over and show people? MRP, production order, partial, serialized items. I think we kind of did that.
Okay, I have one then.
Yeah.
So could you discuss the ATP report for light assembly, where we have a scenario where we have, let's say, kit 1, kit 2, and kit 3, and each of those kits includes component A. And we have a situation where we have 100 units of kit A in stock, component A in stock, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, we're on the phone and we sell 50 kit 1s, consuming 50 of the 100 on-hand component A's. And then let's say at 8:30, we sell 50 kit 2s. So now we have consumed all of the on-hand component A's, having had 100, and we sold 50 with kit 1 and we sold 50 with kit 2. So now it's say 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning, someone calls up and says, hey, I want to buy 50 kit 3s. And the sales guy says, oops, we don't have any, because they're looking at some kind of ATP report. And this would tie in with how we allocate components against the planned, planning, and released status of LM or light assembly.
Okay, if I'm on a sales order, and I think we had a sales order that we're starting here, and this was for a manufactured item. Was it for a manufactured item? Oh, bad one. Let's just delete that. So again, we're going to delete the work order here. And let's go through and let's add a manufactured item, which is in, okay, one of our computers here. Okay, I've got 233 available. So if I put 222 in here, okay, and I've got 92 available. Bad choice. Available for shipping, 233. So I've got 92 available. Let's just pick another item here that we might have more of. Problem with demo stuff, you end up consuming all of your inventory.
Yeah, but Jake, this would be for the demo that we plan in May, where we're going to revisit light assembly and talk about ordering on a looking at the available to promise and talking about bespoke, the capability of linking the work order / kit to the sales order and giving people visibility to the underlying components as well as the finished good top assembly.
I've got a funky order in here that's consuming all of my inventory here. Where am I here? So I've got order number 1030. We'll fix that problem. Order number 1102. So I'll just go out here and I will just go out here and I will just delete this one. Okay, and I'll refresh this. All right, so now I'll go out here and I'll delete this one. Let's just delete this one. Okay, and I got another one here. I'll delete this one. Okay, that should make our picture look better here. So if I refresh this, 293 available. The data is not set up to demo that, Jim, but the concept here is if I hit ATP, okay, it runs out, and it says you can promise that on 324. The reason is I have some available here. It's gone out and it's run the inventory routine, and it's gone out and it's checked that I've done that. Now, if I've got another item, even if I put another line item on here, if I go, okay.
So this could be the same item, or customer says, oh, wait a minute, I need 50 more, as an example, or it could be a different item that has a
different delivery date or something like that.
Or a different item, but using the same component in the example I gave, component A. Right? Got it.
So if I go out here and I say, what's the ATP now? It should go out, and because that number should blow everything apart. And it's showing that my critical constraint is this particular item. It's a hard drive, a 2 terabyte hard drive. And I'm limited by the fact that my vendor's lead time is 15. And I won't be able to get that until the earliest is April 8th. So it's running out, and what it's doing is it's taking all of these bills of material. If each of these have a bill of material, okay, it's looking at all the components in those bill of materials, and it blows it right out to the very bottom. So if I have sub-assemblies and everything like that I may have some dependencies on it, it gets internally, it gets a list of all the items that it's going to need. And then it checks that list against my availability in terms of what I have allocated on that particular item. And if I have product that I don't have, it basically looks at all of the ones that I don't have enough product on hand to do this on the date that the customer wants. Then it runs out and it says, oh, okay, what's the critical item that I have to get? And so that's going to be the item with the longest lead time or the latest available date that I can receive it. And that becomes my available to promise date. So I can't promise this until this date.
And this is with the work order in the planning status. Is that correct, versus planned or released?
There is no work order at this point, but the system is clever enough to know that these are items that have item specifications with them. And so it then takes the item specification and it goes through and it goes from top to bottom. It basically does what this report does here. If we look at the spec component list and we go out and we say, okay, let's look at this particular item. And I'm saying that I want to look at this. So what it's done, it's going out, and although these could be on lower levels, or maybe let me pick a little different one here. Let me go to another system here. Which one is this? Okay, this one will work better. This is Nano. They have more complicated parts. If I look at the spec component list, okay. And so internally, it's generally going out here and it's doing this function. If I go out and I look at an item that I have here and I look at it, so these are all of the items from top to bottom, okay, that are in there. Now, This has actually traversed the hierarchy. Some of these are going to be in subassemblies. If we run out and we look at that same item in a hierarchy, we'll see that if we want to see the structure of the component, we can see the structure of the component. So you'll notice that many of these items are in subassemblies. I'm 6 levels deep in my BOM right here. Okay, but that routine that we had is going through and doing this function of flattening all that out and coming up with the quantities that I need. So it takes all of these quantities to build one and multiplies them by the quantity that I need, and now I have demand. Plus it does that for all of the individual line items. So if I'm going out there and I have you realize it could be a real complex item. If I have 20 items that have a complex build structure like this, that all could share a component, that ATP function could take a while to run because it's thrashing a lot of data.
Fair enough. But so I know we have limited time. So Jake, in this case, as well as Carolyn, when we build the demo data set for the toiletries, probably I'll build a PowerPoint that shows the on-hand components of, say, the comb. And then the comb is in kit 1, beauty product kit 1, and beauty product finished good 2 or kit 2. And we'll have an example where we've got 10 or 100 or some easy to remember number, and then we'll go order from customer 1 X amount, and then we'll go order Y amount with prospect / customer 2, and X plus Y will exceed the amount of on hand that we have. And then we'll say, okay, so this is the case, and now we're smart enough to know that we get the component comb from vendor ABC, and their delivery date is a week. Therefore, we can only promise the second order a week hence, because it's going to take us that long, and we'll go into the procurement, show that we have an order, maybe a blanket order, to get X amount or N amount per week or per month, and that's how the ATP works. So we'll show our prospective VARs how the replenishment logic ties into the ATP logic, that ties into the fact that we've got real-time ATP on components, which is a big deal. That's the point, right? So we have to set the database up to do that demonstration.
Okay. And Jake, just in the limited time we have here, I know that you're doing all the demos on the production planning system. I just wanted to go over, I'm not sure if you've been running the latest software and have seen this sort of thing in your demo, in doing your demos before. Have you seen this?
You're on mute, Jake.
Yep. Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't realize I was. But yes, Greg, I've seen it, but please feel free to run through whatever you're planning to show.
Okay.
This actually, this conditional formatting looks new to me.
It is. And what this does is when you're using a production plan as a master production schedule, okay, so what you're saying is, okay, I've gone through and I've basically put together a plan of what I'm going to release, okay, in over the next year. Here's my next year's production, all things being equal, our forecast being right. Well, what you can do is you may not want to release all of the work orders at one time, and you may want to know what work orders I have released. Well, in this case, what you can do is if you look at it here and you're looking at a line, so here's a line for our computer, and we've gone through and we ran an algorithm on it here, and we came up with quantities that we wanted to build in future periods. The green indicates here that I've basically created work orders for these items. So these items have been, let's say, released from the master production schedule, and there are work orders for them out there. Now, the yellow is going to indicate, because I've said that I'm going to do generate 5 periods. If I want to generate 7 periods, you'll notice that it's showing me the work orders that if I go through and I say generate work orders now, it's going to generate work orders for the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th period, okay? So this is a way, if I only want to release for the next period, I will do this. And so this is a way of me being able to keep track of, on my master production schedule, what I've actually released, so that the purchasing people, I know what the purchasing people have visibility of, and I know what the manufacturing people have visibility of. So that's a feature that we have here on this. Another feature that we have is the ability to export to Excel and import from Excel. A lot of people still like to do forecasting manually. So I've added the ability to export this to Excel, manually massage it, and then you can import it back into Excel here if you want. And again, just to reinforce the substitute, important factors are what do you want as your inventory source? And your inventory source can either be sales or manufacturing, where we have one unique case where it's something different. There's a customization that's coming down the line. I won't get into it. But you've got, or you can have a substitute inventory. So here might be a case where you pick a substitute inventory. You say, okay, we're going to come up with a new model. And okay, so a guy asks, well, what are our projections that we'll be able to do this? Well, it replaces model ELE-COMP1. Okay, and the substitute item is going to be ELE-COMP2. Okay, so we're going to say we're coming out with a new computer, and we can generally say that our marketing and our sales force is going to be able to, use this as a complete replacement for the item that we're phasing out. What you're doing in this case is when you generate the work orders, you are going to be using the historical information from this item, but you're realizing that this item is going to supersede it. And so it will generate production orders for this item with this item's potentially modified bill of materials or specification. So those are just a few new features that were brought in version 1.7 for the production planning system.
Thank you. And Greg, would you do me a favor? Then I got to run. Go back to the spreadsheet for just a second.
Yeah.
And then I don't know where ATP is on the list in column B. There you go. And now go over to the point that I'm making here for the team is ATP from a marketing standpoint appeals to the light assembly market, but also the make to stock. So we need demonstrations. The conditional formatting that Greg was just showing was putting together a forward-looking master production schedule, typically that you would do for a make-to-stock manufacturer for Flex Discrete, utilizing the demand planning tool. It's also a good tool for light assembly, for a distributor that says, hey, okay, I got to go buy stuff, and I want to make sure I'm not out of stock on the stuff I need to buy, because I imagine that I'm going to, as an example, sell 500 widgets a month. The make-to-stock production guy says, I'm going to have to make 500 widgets a month. So in both instances, this demand planning tool is essential for using statistics to augment a master production schedule, or as Greg said, maybe they want to do it in Excel and they upload it into the tool, and then that blows out, and if there are manufacturers, it's going to say not only how many am I going to sell, but if I'm going to sell this many, let me run through my bills of materials / kits and find out how many I have to make, and or a combination of make and buy to generate the purchasing plan that then generates the, oh, okay, if I'm going to have this master production schedule for the next 6 months, how much do I have to commit in terms of buying so that I can go to the bank to borrow the money? Fair enough? So very powerful.
Yeah, and one last feature before I go that I forgot to mention, Jake, is I've got these 3 generated. If I go, oh, that's all wrong, I can just hit this button and I will delete all these work orders. I mean, I could have created 12, and I went, now it's a big pain to go through and individually delete 12 work orders, cherry pick them out of the list of work orders and delete them. What I can do is I can just hit delete work orders and it will delete all 12 of these.
Right.
So another feature.
But the cool thing is here, Jake, the cool thing here is that, yeah, and the cool thing from my perspective is that the green, I could run the plan on the green and say, okay, boss, this means I got to commit $425,000 in purchase orders to make the green. If it's green and yellow, then my spend to my vendors goes from $425,000 to $617,000. But I get a break because I get some volume discounts on these items. If I want to go out the year, oh, okay, the year plan is $3,025,000. And then Greg goes, okay, Jim, Mr. Salesman, do you put your job on the line to make these sales? Because I got to put my ass on the line to go spend $3 million with our vendors to make this plan, right? We can have fun on the demo doing back and forth like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Greg, I just have one question. And thank you, Jim, for that. Green is indicating that that the work orders have been created or that they've been released.
They've been created.
And yellow has not been created at all.
Yellow is if you generate, if yellow means that I'm saying, what periods am I going to want to delete? Okay. That means that if I hit generate work orders, I'm only going to generate one work order for that period. Okay. I just generated for that period. So I may want to, basically, release my work orders on a.
And does that correlate with planning, planned, and released, Greg?
No. Okay. If we go back to production orders, every production order that comes into the system, right? Okay. Where was it? Every production order that comes into the system, like this one here that's just come in, they all come in a planning state. And then you advance them from that point. Okay. If you want to advance them in mass, okay, what you can do is you can use the prod order processing form and say, for instance, I had a production schedule for 50 items across 6 months. Okay. I just generated 300 production orders, right? I can go through and I can say, okay,
fine, thank you.
Complete planning, put my fence on them, anything I want.
Finishing up on another meeting, but I have that on a different computer, so you've got my undivided attention.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, I think
I think Carolyn's on that other meeting. Can I ask you a favor? Can you give me a 1 minute break? I'll be back in 1 minute.
Thanks so much for today. You've really, it's really been great.
Okay.
I know Jim and I have to jump onto a different meeting. Can I leave you with David for just about 2 minutes? I think he wants to discuss a case that needs to be logged for him on backlog.
Sure.
But thanks so much. This has been really great.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Craig, can I ask you to create for me a task in backlog for the clock on and clock off functionality, and also the one for the scanning processing?
Okay. Let's just go in here. Where am I here? Add an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we want this is going to be a request because it's a new feature. And this is okay, we'll assign this to David.
Hey, Carolyn. All right.
We'll pick the versions. You're going to start on this version. Okay.
Yeah, the last
Excellent.
version. And I can send you requirements, specification, or...
I think I have it here. If I actually go here.
That's good. That's good.
Let me just, okay, what we'll do is we'll add the spec to it. Let me just go in here. I think if I look up my Word document, it'll be in my...
Fantastic. And then just an FYI to everybody, at the customer site, there is a manager whose name is Brian Roth. And Brian is he's on our side. He's a good guy for us. The terminology in English is our internal advocate. He advocates for our best interests. Fair enough? So he's a good guy, right? Because he's our advocate. So he's available today after 9:30. So if, as an example, Carolyn, I'm not saying we should do this or not, but if we've got something set up and I can say, okay, Brian, hey, go in there and play around, right? Awesome. I can do that. So if we want to run through this initially and then after we're done, make a little demo for him, we could do that and then send him the demo and say, hey, by the way, follow these instructions and go for it, right? So I don't know if we want to go through this once without a demonstration and then go through and record. I said demonstration, I meant to say record this for Brian as well as Kathleen. You make that call, Carolyn, okay?
Hey, Jim, are you on this call with us? Okay, David. Now, what was the second item?
I think I'm good. First one, because the first one is including the clock on, clock off, and the scanning processing. So this number, okay. So
I think I got to make one change on it. Okay, and that is
there is
that's the version
and
you're starting.
FYI,
this is the version.
The top of the hour, 9 o'clock my time, I have a 5-minute phone call on another matter with a customer.
If you need anything else, David, I want to make sure you're not able to add these. You should be able to add these.
I apologize, but that's just it's somebody I've been trying to reach on a different product. It's a customer. So, okay, anyway.
Where are you here?
Yeah, this one.
Okay, you're there. And what are your...
Yeah, we're all good.
Okay. Hopefully you'll be able to create them now, I think.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good. Yeah, let's just keep going through, and then we'll make notes.